I think we're live.
All right.
Great. It shows that we're
live. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stacey and Alverne for joining this conversation with Magic City Books and Abrams Books as well, Megascope, and OKPOP. Well, let's just start off by can you guys just introduce yourselves to everybody and just talk a little bit about your backgrounds?
Sure. My name is Stacey Robinson. I teach graphic design and illustration at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, about 2 hours south of Chicago. And I'm originally from Albany, New York. And interesting fact about me, I moved to the Bronx the day that Tupac died. And the next day I started an internship at Milestone Media Incorporated, which is one of the most popular and successful Black owned and operated comic book companies.
Hi, I'm Alverne Ball. I have an MFA in creative writing from Columbia College, Chicago. I was a 2019 Tin House graphic novelist scholar. I've written comics, movies, TV. I think I've written just about anything you can think of. I've probably tried my hand at. Something, I don't know if I have a interesting fact about me other than when I was 16, I got into comic books and I was hiding them from my friends and putting them in my grandma's ceiling in her basement. So for about 2 years, I hid that I read comics. And then one day I kind of came out and told my friends I read comics and they were like, oh, cool. Because we like that X-Men thing. And I was like, oh, y'all do? Okay, we can get along now.
That's how it is though now. Things that were not very cool before are now really cool. They're, billion-dollar movie franchises and stuff like that. So that's really cool. No, and I love the shirts too. I love the Wakanda shirt you're rocking there. It's very cool. Yeah, well, let's just kind of get into it. We're here to talk about Across the Tracks, which is a graphic novel adaptation of really not just the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, but really Greenwood as a whole. So, and I see yes, you can buy it at Magic City Books today. So just kind of, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And this is something that, thanks to Watchmen and Lovecraft Country and other pop culture offerings, we've been exposed to this now, but a lot of people are still coming at it from a very new perspective. Some people haven't heard about it, or maybe they know a little bit about it, but not a whole lot. So really, how did you both hear about the massacre, or when did you hear about it?
I'll take this one. I'll start first. For me, I think I'd always heard about it in some way or form. All of my family, my great aunts and grandmas, they're all from the South, from Mississippi. So I think it was always talked about when we were kids in some form or manner. But I think I became more aware of it. I want to say, I think probably first or second year in college when I became more aware that like it was an actual event. Because again, when you're a kid and you hear your family talk about it, it's almost like it's spoken of as like not as like a folktale, kind of thing that, I just remember when we used to go when we used to go on family reunions to the South, we'd all be in these caravans of cars. And even in the 80s, this is the late 80s, early 90s, I remember us, there were moments where I would, driving to Mississippi, it's like an 18-hour drive. And there were moments, depending on where we were, we wouldn't stop, and my grandma she was old school, so she kept everything. And I remember finding when I was a kid, the green book, like an actual green book, and asking her about that. And at the time, she was trying to explain to me, but I didn't really get it. But then looking back, I understand now, there were moments where we didn't stop in certain towns or we just kept pushing through. And this is early 90s. Wow. But I think I'd always heard about it to some form of, there was this, it wasn't a mythical place, but there was this place that existed. And it was always talked about, as this place that had been destroyed,
Yeah, I want to say, if I heard about it before, I don't remember hearing about it, but the first time I remember hearing about it and learning, getting into it and studying it was in graduate school. So that was around 2013, 2014.
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, it's something that happened that was largely covered up, and isn't really until now, unfortunately, that we're starting to get, not only a lot of history books of it, but it's starting to kind of permeate our popular culture. Well, and so that's one thing I want to talk to you guys about. You probably could have done this book in a lot of other ways. So what are some of the benefits of doing it in a graphic novel? Because right now with the Centennial, there's so many books about it. Why the graphic novel comic format for the story?
I think graphic novels are a great entry point, not only for younger readers, but I think for all readers, because you're combining text with pictures. And the graphic novel form, when you think about Watchmen as a graphic novel, or one of my favorites, Preacher, there's something about the graphic novel form that grabs you in a way that a novel can't. And I trust me, I come from a literary background, so I love novels, but sometimes a graphic novel pulls you into a story in a way that I think sometimes a novel makes you have to recreate certain images in your head, and we get those images or ideas of who these characters are and who they're in the world in a way that we're really reimagining stuff that we really see in pop culture or in a movie or in a film or a TV show to try to replace what's been described, whereas a graphic novel, that description of that place or this person or that character is right there in your face. You don't have to try to visualize what that person or that time period felt like or looked like. It's right there so that you're immersed in that world in a way that I think sometimes other different mediums can't give you. The magic of comics is those, in between those panels is where I always say the magic happens. And so in your mind, you're still recreating movement in a way that it's almost like you're seeing animation without it being animated.
Yeah. You want to add anything to that, Stacey?
I don't know if I can add anything better than that. That was great. But as a visual artist, as a visual storyteller, a graphic designer, an exhibition artist, it is the best medium I would say would be my preferred medium to help tell this story. And we may get into it a little bit later, but even with the style in which I rendered the images kind of ages the book down for a lower readership, for a younger readership rather. But also I think it has enough funk and flavor to attract an older audience as well. So I'm a propaganda artist. I'm recruiting, I'm indoctrinating, I shamelessly, even there's some ways in which I told the story. The reader is in the crowd of Black people when they're marching downtown to the courthouse. You are in that room on that double page spread. You are in the room with the Black people, right? And those are storytelling choices that were intentional, right? So for me, I'm going to make you feel what I feel when I read the script or when I'm absorbing this history, right? You're going to be on the side of Black people, whether you want to be or not, right? So for that, in that particular way, the graphic novel is the best way, in my opinion, to tell that story. And I like to think I want you to see that Black opulence. That's another reason why the colors are bright and vibrant, and I didn't choose, say, a sepia tone, right, to tell the story, right? Black history, American history happened in full color. Like I wanted you to just see what was destroyed and be attracted to it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so, I'm a longtime comic book fan as well, curator of comic books now. So I love that you all chose this because, like you said, there's something different about reading it and seeing the image right there, where you don't have to try to envision it in your mind off the words. You're getting both, both handfuls right there. So it reads a lot like a documentary. because the information is really concise. You all get your writing gets to the point of the narrative, and then of course with the imagery, it really you make these stories really pop and really come to life. And so that's one thing that, the first thing I picked up on the book was like, how much research did these guys do? Because I mean, you guys get, yeah, you have some names of the buildings that maybe weren't the names, but also you have some that were, and you talk about a lot of the people and a lot of the origin in the early history of Greenwood. So can you guys talk a little bit about that research process?
Yeah, for me there, I had I think I got 5 or 6 books that are on the shelf behind me. They're all about Greenwood. They're about one of them that I found that I didn't even know. There was a whole like commission panel done on Tulsa. I don't know if everybody watched yesterday. There was a whole reparations Tulsa thing that was going on in Congress. But there was a whole, they did it, I think it was in 97. They did a report, like a 9/11 report on everything that had basically all the property that have been destroyed and all the lives that have been lost, or at least those that they could find and trace back to a coroner's report and that kind of thing. So that was there. It was a couple other books, and then there was a lot of online searching, at least for me. So I was jumping between 5 books. Yeah, it was 5 books, and then I was jumping between the Historical Society, the Tulsa Historical Society, and then a couple random websites I found where people had posted images of different things, like the train station in Tulsa in 1921 or 1920. So there was stuff I was just pulling for so many different things, trying to create this narrative. And for me, it was about because you said it's like a documentary. I wasn't even thinking about it as being a documentary until you said that. I was just thinking that when I was writing it, I really wanted to know who these people were who built up this town, but I also wanted I wanted people to be able to like get a glimpse, and then if they wanted to dig further, they had a name, they had something that they could go on. And because there's just what I started finding when I started doing all the research was that there was just, for some of these people, there was a massive amount of information, and it spanned from from the early 1900s or the 1920s, even past the destruction and rebuilding of Greenwood. I was just like, man, I could go on and do a whole book on this person, because they really revolutionized a lot of things. And so, but it became this thing of, okay, how much do you tell, and how much can you tell, then how much can you move on? So what I did was like the timeline in the front of the book, I thought of every character or every person, not characters because they were real people. I thought of every real person in a timeline. Like, what could I tell between this time? Because I was working backwards from how I did it was that I worked from the beginning of when Tulsa first started. And I tried to go, okay, what's the end result? The rebuilding, first the destruction and then the rebuilding. And so I thought about, okay, if I'm going to tell the beginning, just telling the beginning of how Tulsa started, I was like, that could be a whole book. So I was like, okay, I gotta get in and tell the thing that, for me, what was the genesis of Greenwood starting and not Tulsa starting, and that's where I went, and that's how I started it.
Okay. Yeah, no, and that definitely comes through, like you mentioned, the start of Greenwood, where you all mentioned a lot in the book, the geographical location of Greenwood. How not only was it across the tracks, but it was, it was the longest stretch that didn't cross over. So what do you think about the geographical location that really helped the success of Greenwood?
I'll speak and then I'll let Stacey speak. For me, that was important. And I don't know where I found that at, but it was I think it was in a book, but it was just a line. It was just like one line and I was like, whoa, wait, what? And so what I did was that I went back, I tried to find as many historical images of that train station, because that's where it was across the tracks. And every time I went back and looked at something that I had originally pitched for the story, and it was all about these train tracks. And I kept thinking about, like, in Chicago, there's that imaginary line of when you talk about the Red Summer, or at least in this idea that the riot of 1919 in Chicago, and there being this imaginary line. And I kept thinking, and particularly for me in Chicago, everything is divided by train tracks or highway. And I think it was John Jennings that came with the title Across the Tracks, because we were trying to figure it out. And as soon as he said it, everything for me kind of, it just kind of, as soon as I, like, heard the title, everything came together. And that's when I started just looking at the geographical layout of where Greenwood was in comparison to where the train tracks was. Because when we speak of Greenwood, we talk about it as like it's another city, but it's just a part of Tulsa, really. You know, so really you got to talk about Tulsa as a whole, but you're talking about this section of a city. And so when we talk about Black Wall Street, most people think of it as its own city, but it's really a city within a city. And that's how I came to think of Greenwood, was that it was a city within a city, you know? Now I'll let Stacey speak.
You know, I was thinking about you asked a question, what was it about Greenwood that made Greenwood so unique and so special, so successful? And when you look at it and think about it, this was not the only, I like to refer to this as our Wakanda, right? But this was not our only Wakanda, right? It may be considered the most successful, right? I don't know, right? Depends on how you would define that, but it's not the only one. But when you look at it, you look at Italian communities, Asian, like Korean communities, Chinese communities, Jewish communities, etc. I know I can go to Brooklyn right now, and you know, you look at the Jewish community there. It's a very self-sufficient, very successful community, right? Well, Black people do that too. Right. The issue comes where when we do unite, our communities are destroyed. Right. So what makes that successful is the unity that we had until we were destroyed. And I think what if we could look at what can we glean from that history? It is maybe, in my thinking, the importance of being able to protect our Black communities, right? When we, you know, just like any other community that is, and maybe segregated, it might not be the right term. However, for lack of a better term right now, I'll use that term. They tend to be successful, right? Because you have like-minded people with a like-minded goal. And anytime you have that, you're going to have a successful space. Same thing with us, but when we do it, our communities are destroyed, right? So you look at Rosewood, Florida, the Move community in Philadelphia, right? In a particular way, I want to say that Greenwood is not unique. Right. And in a particular way, it's not unique, but of course it is very, very unique. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Well, and that's an interesting point where we, you know, now currently with modernity, we always think of segregation as like, you know, as an evil, but it's like segregation, the fact that these people, they couldn't go anywhere else. They had to spend the dollar there. That's what made the community so strong. And like you mentioned, you know, with O.W. Gurley building a hotel, you know, buying acres of land specifically with the intent of selling it to Black bodies. And so it's just like, you're right. Like it's not unique in the fact that there were a lot of other Black utopias, but I feel like it is unique in definitely the location, with Oklahoma being so stingent on like preserving Jim Crow, because that was, you know, legislative bill 1 in Oklahoma was to support Jim Crow. So it's like the fact that we could do that here in Oklahoma, make Greenwood, and at one point in time there were over like 75 all Black towns in Oklahoma. So it shows how our history has been so changed in this state, specifically just with the massacre. But I did want to ask you one question, because it was on my mind throughout the whole book, is how did you determine who to talk about and who to not talk
about? So for me, it came down to looking at the timeline of who was where and when, and trying to figure out, because what I found in doing the research was that there was a lot of people that lost their lives. There were a lot of families that are not mentioned. And for me, it was trying to find those that were mentioned that I could look up and go, okay, this piece fits this piece, and the puzzles it works. Like when you talk about O.W. Gurley, he's mentioned, but when you go to try to research him, there's not a lot on the guy. You know, other than, you know, at one point after the rebuild, he leaves and, you know, he goes off to California, you know, and starts something else. But then in that same breath, while he's building, as you say, he's building a hotel, there's JB Stratford, who is front and center on every issue that's going on in Greenwood and Oklahoma and in Tulsa. He's like there. And like, there's a whole section of this city that hates this one dude because he's a lawyer and he's smart and he keeps flipping the laws and turning it on them in a way that they're just like, yeah, this Jim Crow ain't working because, this dude keeps turning and finding, a back door to everything. And so for me, it was trying to find those people that we could talk about that, especially for me, when I thought about Greenwood, I wanted to talk about, at one point, I think we were in a meeting and they were talking about, they wanted to learn about the businesses. And I was like, well, that's great. But my thing was, well, okay, if we're going to talk about the businesses, we have to talk about the business owners behind the businesses, because without them, there is no business. So I think at one point I decided, it was just, I don't know if it was conscious or subconscious, but I was like, I want to know about those people that built those businesses. We're going to talk about the greatness of Black Wall Street and why it was called Black Wall Street. And we really have to look at the people that made it Black Wall Street. The businesses, yeah, sure, they garnered and made the profits, that made the thing, that made this street known for what it was, but it was the people behind it, that really made Black Wall Street. When you talk, that's just like if you're talking about jazz or blues, in Chicago, it's like, oh yeah, you can talk about Muddy Waters, if you can talk about all these great places that they played in, but if you don't talk about the musicians that were behind it, then it's like, what was the use of going to, and having these places? So for me, it was trying to find evidence of those people that I could talk about. There were a lot of mentions of different families, again, that I just couldn't find anything on other than a name. There was this one place where they listed, somebody had listed an image of all the graduating kids that had graduated from that first year of I think it was Booker T. Washington High School. And each one of those kids went on to like be lawyers and doctors, but like they were the first generation to graduate. So when you think about how much weight had to be on them to not only be excellent, but to go on and do excellent, and part of that was that they were bound to be excellent because, they were young, Black, and gifted. But, when you look at that, it's like, how many of those can I tell? And that's the future right there, and did they live? I don't know, but just showing that most of them went on to do great things told me, yeah, they lived. But, I don't know, it became a balance way of trying to tell who was there at that time and then who was there afterwards. Like, we could easily do a follow-up and go after the massacre and talk about that rebuilding and what Reaganomics and a couple other things did to deter and destroy or try to stop the rebuilding of Greenwood to that former glory,
Yeah, that's definitely another book there of the rest of the story, everybody else. And I felt your struggle when I was reading this, because I'm like, oh, where's AJ Smitherman? Where's this? I'm like, oh, okay. But then what was there? Because I took notes on it. I'm like, man, there are like 8 or 9 different people who they mentioned like by name and their business associated with them. And it's so the history of it is very rich, and I really appreciated that. And that's something I want to get into now with just talking about you, Stacey. I mean, the book is beautiful. I'm trying to just, get some visuals there where it's a beautiful book. The art is amazing. The colors really pop. But I wanted to talk to you guys about the actual massacre that you all show, because a lot of books and television shows that they tend to just glorifies or reduce Greenwood down to the 18 hours it was on fire. They talk about how, whatever it was, it burnt down, and then that's the end of the story. And that does a huge disservice to Greenwood and all the people that lost their lives there, because we know that it was prosperous. It was a Wakanda before Wakanda. It burnt, and then it was rebuilt. And up until, like you said, the highways were really the final nail in the coffin in Greenwood. So I just wanted to show this page. Little spoiler, one of the few pages that we'll show here. This page. So this is the page right here, page 41, where you all show the airplanes flying over Greenwood. And this one, it's a really powerful page, and two, the idea of, Pearl Harbor not being the first time, projectiles were dropped on American soil, but really it was in 1921 in Greenwood. And so that's one thing, as a historian, I hear a lot of people say, oh, it was dynamite, it was Molotov's cocktails, but you guys get into the weeds calling them turpentine bombs. And I really appreciate that, because that's one thing that, it's one thing to know about it, but then sometimes some of that information gets muddled up as something, permeates our zeitgeist and, in popular culture. So I just really love that you guys showed it, but you showed the violence in a respectful way, that you weren't just showing, black bodies being damaged. And so can you guys talk a little bit about kind of the thoughts behind that, specifically you, Stacey, since you're the hands that drew it?
Yeah, I'll let Stacey talk first.
Okay, cool. So first of all, that particular page, most people would not notice unless I said it, but I actually took a screenshot of I think was that episode 7 of Lovecraft Country, and I drew over that. Because I wanted to bring the popular culture into the moment. I wanted to sample and remix that, because I'm a hip hop head, right? So I wanted to bring that culture into the book, and this is a very subtle shout out, right, to the moment and to further that. In reference to not showing the massacre in a very particular way. So one of the things Alverne and I talked about, this book, first of all, the book that you see is a compromise, right? It is not the first version of the book. It is not the first version of the book that was pitched.
Always,
right?
Yeah.
This was a compromise, and this is what happens in publishing, right? You might pitch an idea, sales team might come back, editors might come back, and then there's always a balancing act until you get to what you both decide that you will publish, right? The decision that we did come up with, though, I remember Alverne and I were like, we're not going to show bodies being burned, blown apart. The trauma porn was not going to be in the book. So what you will notice in the book, or what you might not notice actually, is you don't see one muzzle flare from a weapon. You don't see one muzzle flare. You see a lot of bang, pow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? You see a lot of guns. I'm going to show you black folks were fighting back. And as a reader, you are on the side of those black folks fighting back, right? But you don't see one destroyed body like that. And, I thought it was important, but this was not, I can't say this was just my decision, right? This was a conversation. If Alverne said, no, we're going to show this, then that's what I would have drawn, right? Like, my job as an illustrator is to tell the story, but also my job as the illustrator is to tell the story within the story, right? And that's why when you get to that double page spread, for example, I took some liberties in telling that particular story, right? So it was about there were a number of reasons why I didn't want to show muzzle flares, and why I think we decided to not show those bodies being depicted in those particular ways. And one, it was to pull away from this thing that tends to happen in popular culture. We watched Walter Scott die live on social media. Philando Castillo was killed live on Facebook, right? Like, while his wife live streamed that with their daughter in the backseat. We've seen Black people die in social media and we become desensitized to it in a particular way. This book was not going to be that fetish. So, but that was a compromise, and that was, I hope that makes sense. I don't want to talk too much. I don't want to take up too much time talking about that. But Alverne, please, add to that.
Yeah, I think you said it right, that I just remember before we sat down, before I decided to write anything, before you decided to draw anything, we came to a consensus. There would be no Black porn, no Black death. Just because we had already had two popular, shows that had shown it. So it was like, for me, it was like, okay, we've got enough. And not only that, but when you look at like any slave narrative movie or any type of, we've already seen that before. And for me, it was about celebrating the joy in life of this community and not the destruction of it. And I know, as Americans, we love the action, we love that's what gets us kind of excited. But at the same time, I didn't want this to be like, oh, wait, when are we gonna get there? When are we gonna get there to the destruction? I wanted there to be this love letter or this journey of going through and seeing this town resurrected. And then when you finally, because it's coming at some point, that when you finally get to the massacre, you're angry. You don't want it to happen because you've just seen so much greatness that you're like, nope, I'm not gonna read this part. Nope. Okay, I got to. And then when you finally do, you realize what all the citizens, all those people that live in Greenwood, all those that still live there, you realize the same thing, that you come to this conclusion that you're losing something. You're losing this thing that they've already lost. And now you get to feel that loss in such a way that you want it back. You want to go back to the beginning and go, okay, I'm going to stop here. But then when you see, as Stacey said, Black folks fighting back, you're like, yes, finally, we didn't just lay down and take it, like most popular culture things have us believe, or like, when you talk about slavery and, oh yeah, we just took it and, and we just kept going and that's how we survived. No, there were some that realized, when you look, one of the movies that I thought about when I'm writing this, and again, I want to harp on this, was what's the movie with, I can't think of the guy's name. It's going to come to me. Not American Skin. God, but he did make that. But it was basically about this revolution. I can't think of what, but it was about the Black revolt of Nigeria. Sorry,
Nat Turner.
Yeah, yes, Nat Turner. Thank you. Yes, and I thought about that, and I thought, man, when you look at that movie that was made, which I thought was an excellent movie. You think about that story, they started murdering Black folks because of a rebellion that happened, in a whole nother state, but everybody had to get it because we have to show you a lesson. So it was the idea that I wanted people to understand that when you think about Greenwood and stuff, look, this wasn't just one incident. This was an incident that happened in Greenwood. But when they talk about the Red Summer, of 1921, and there were lynchings and riots and everything was going on around the same time from city to city. And at the time what I thought was interesting, and I hopefully Stacey, because Stacey mentioned the remix, as I like to call it, there was this rise of the Klan at that time, and that's what fed into what eventually the downfall of Greenwood and a lot of other riots. But it was what I wanted to touch on that I didn't ever get to touch on, and I hope we get to touch on it, was not Uncle Tom's, was it Uncle Tom's Cabin? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's Uncle Tom's Cabin. They came out right around that same time when this is the rise, and this is what starts the rise of the Klan, And so for me, it was just about making sure that I represented, or felt like I could represent Greenwood and the citizens there as much as I could without actually being there. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry that took so long to explain.
No apology, man. That was a great answer. No, for sure. So you're talking about the rebuilding of it and how important that is. Like we said before, you got to tell the whole story. It wasn't just a utopia that burnt down. It was a utopia that burnt down, then it rebuilt itself. But that brings me to my second favorite page of your book, where you guys actually show them brick by brick rebuilding it, with the placards that say 1922, which if you walk in down Greenwood now in Tulsa, you still see those placards on the top of the building of 1922 and 1924. So like I said, I can't talk enough about this book and how positive it made me feel. Like, as a Black man, again, you don't see any Black chaos in this, but you tell a fully all-encompassing story of Black excellence without the harm in showing that. And so, can you guys just talk a little bit about the rebuilding and whether some research you found about it or just why it was so important for you guys to show it in the way that you did.
Yeah, so originally when we were talking about and pitching this was going to be a story about different Black folks coming from different backgrounds, and eventually what we got to was this thing of the people of Greenwood. And in the research, I found that there was a rebuilding. I was like, wait, what? There was a rebuilding? Like, nobody talks about the rebuild. I was like, wait, there's this whole, I was like, I could do a whole nother book on just the rebuild. And, and I was like, it just blew my mind. I was like, from what all I've ever heard, and especially what in the zeitgeist of pop culture, they make it seem like this place was just, destroyed and just went away. Like they just bulldozed over it, and Black folks got sent back out into the country and back into the wild. And I was like, wait, there's a rebuild? Wait. And then when you start reading about the rebuild and how the local government was really trying to stop it, I'm like, damn, forget my language. I'm like, man, these people were the real deal. They were not laying down. And so finding that out, it just, like you said, it gave me so much power that I was just like, man, imagine, for me, I always talk about history. Imagine like when you find out something that you never did discover, especially as a Black person, you're going, wait, that existed. It changed your whole perspective of where you come from and what you can do, and so something I wanted to touch on also was when you asked about the turpentine bombs. There's a documentary I found on YouTube, very old documentary, and they had some of the survivors from the massacre. And it was a lady, she talked about the smell of turpentine. Mm. And that's where that came from. She was saying that they dropped turpentine bombs, and the reason she knew it because she could smell it on everything. And I thought, oh, wow, that's a detail that I didn't even know. But going back to the rebuild, I wanted to, in the script, I wanted to make sure we shown that there's a brick by brick process. But in that brick by brick process, I wanted to also show that there was opposition to every brick being laid. And that, but Black folks, as we know, were like, nah, we're resilient. We'll find a way. We'll keep finding a way. And so what I wanted to show was that with every opposition, there was a new brick. There was a new layer of this building. And I wanted to represent that this new building was not only a new building in the town and the rebirth of this town, but it was Black folks' blood. It was their tears, it was their sweat, it was their resilience in every brick to say, we're not gonna just let y'all have this land and run away and go to another town or go to another city or go north. We're going to stay here and we're going to rebuild it, and we're going to set claim to what's ours and make sure it's ours. Instead of you giving us 40 acres and a mule, we're going to take our 40 acres and a mule, and we're going to keep our 40 acres and a mule. And now, hey, you can have the mule. We'll keep the 40 acres and we'll build on that, and we'll continue to build. So that was, for me, that's what that was.
I'm not following that
up. Well, I'm curious to hear from you a little bit, Stacey, just as the person that had to draw that. Like, were you, how important was it, that you were accurate, but also, like you said, Alverne gave you a lot to try to capture with your art. Say, what were some of the, what was that like?
Yeah, so I tried to be as accurate as possible. Alverne, I'm wondering if that documentary you're referring to, I think there was a documentary that I referenced a lot called, I think it was called The Lynching in Tulsa.
I think so.
Yeah. And I also relied a lot on those accounts, the Tulsa Historical Society, and there are some books I also looked at and referenced as well. I tried to be as accurate as possible. There are 4 people in the book I could find no likenesses of at all, and the editorial decision was made to make up the likenesses. And I think those are on page, I want to say a page maybe like 11 through 14, I think. And that bothered me somewhat, that I would have to make up likenesses and I could not find the references. And here's the thing, we did this book in 2 months, right? And so I was literally researching and drawing at the same time. Like it was insane. It was a marathon of researching, reading, watching, and trying to get those depictions right. But at the same time, you know, I took the liberty of trying to leave the audience with a joy, right? And that's what I tried to do on that last page. So for example, the Christmas tree that I saw in the documentary did not look like that, right? I added the tinsel, the star, I even added snow, right? And that was an editorial decision because I wanted to represent that this was a new, I wanted to represent that it was a new day, but it was bright that day as well, right? I wanted to represent that. And that one person, I've even gotten pushback from that one person at the end smiling, right? And what I chose to do, because that was not in the script, was that is, we're moving on, we're still here, right? A lot of people would, you know, definitely, no, I want to see the violence, and no, they was busting back. My thing is this is the fourth or fifth story that I've written, that I've worked on, that is about Black death and destruction, right? So since 2016, I worked on the prison industrial complex for beginners, Kindred, the graphic novel, I Am Alfonso Jones, which is the first Black Lives Matter inspired graphic novel, and this, right? And so this is like the fourth book, and then all my exhibitions are kind of dealing with you know, Black death, destruction, and trauma, but in an Afrofuturist lens that gives us power and agency, but it comes from a dark place, right? I was like, we're going to be absorbing a lot this year in reference to Tulsa and you know, Greenwood in this history. At the end of it, I wanted to leave us with some joy, right? Now, that wasn't in the story. That might not have been the best decision, right? That Christmas tree, that depiction of it might not have been the best one. The future will let us know, right? But I tried to be as accurate as possible, but at the same time, give us some hope, because I thought that was the responsible thing to do as we're about to get into the summer, as we're about to approach the centennial, and we're going to be absorbing a lot of this.
Yeah. No, and that's, like I said, like Alverne, the words that you chose to write in this book to convey your message, along with the art, Stacey, it really tells a really deep history and a really impactful narrative of the complete story of Greenwood, which again is something we know we don't get a lot. So the fact that, I think it's 4 pages are dedicated to the actual massacre, and the rest of it is all about, you know, the Black resilience. And like you said, ending it with that, you know, controversial smirk of saying that, hey, like, you're not going to get us, we're still here. Like, I love that part. You know, again, I was right there with the crowd looking at the tree, you know, in that page. And so it's really nice to see a Black historical book that does end on a positive note, that has that just positivity in it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add something there, Alverne?
Yeah, I was thinking about those pages before you get to the Christmas tree, and I wanted to show, and I know it's in the script, I wanted to show like all these various lives of different people, like normal people that had survived, not only store owners, but normal people. And I wanted to show them, like, you know, they were all getting ready to go to this thing. And I wanted to show that there was still a community there, and that and even in the destruction, these people stayed together, they found each other, and that they were coming together to still be a community. Well, like Stacey said, when we do it, it gets destroyed. So there was this idea that in the script and in what you see in the book, I wanted to show that there were different walks of life, different shades of Black, that everybody wasn't poor. Everybody, they were working class, they were rich, they were semi-poor, but all these people endured the same thing, whether you had money or not. And at the end, you all come together around that Christmas tree and you're equal. I really wanted to show that Black experience, because I don't think we get enough of that, you know, especially Black men. We get this when we get to a point where if we're not talking hood or jive or whatever, and we talk educated, we're supposed, oh, you're talking white. And, you know, but what does that really mean? You know, and so Stacey, we talked about this in in the remix of the original version that we were going to do, there was all these different types of walks of Black life that, you know, I really wanted to talk, or at least show that we're not a monolith, you know, and that thing, like the idea that we all need, Black people need a leader to lead them somewhere. And that's what I kind of love about this, the whole Black Lives Movement, is that there's no single leader. And who said, you know, for every other ethnicity, nobody has to have one monolith leader, but for us, we got to have that one, or we can't get organized.
It's the Black Messiah principle.
Yeah.
You know, that's exactly.
You have to isolate them so you can kill them.
Yeah,
right.
Seriously, that's what that is. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's COINTELPRO, right? That is, that's exactly what that is.
Oh wow, we don't even touch on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, like you said, that, you know, that as a Black community, there's just so much ways we have to go, and it seems, you know, so hard to get there at times. But again, you know, I love this positive note where you can say, hey, they did it, so can I, you know, because representation is everything. You know, it matters so much, and it's so undervalued. So that's why I love the story that you can, again, you have a concise history of an area, but then you also show the negative aspects of what happened, but then you end it saying, but don't forget, the story's not over, and the story can carry on with you.
Yeah. And I want to shout out my son Solomon, who is the primary colorist on the book, Anthony Moncada, who is a former student, and Alex Batchelor, who's a former student, and Damian Duffy, who was the letterer on the book. John Jennings even jumped in and assisted on some colors, and Charlotte Greenbaum, our editor, you know, and Maya Bradford, who's handling all our promo stuff right now, and shouts out to Charles and Andrew, Charles Cochman and Andrew Smith. I mean, and just even Abrams for giving space for Megascope. You know, this was a team effort, and everybody on the book was not Black, right? This was a massive effort of a lot of Black folks, but a lot of non-Black folks that are serious allies, right? And this is how this work happens. This is how this freedom happens. And shouts out to Dr. Colette Yellow Robe and Dr. Ronaldo Anderson, who wrote the essays in the book, in the back of the book as well. This book will be taught, right? And this was a team of like-minded individuals who worked to get a book out in 2 months, right? There was a lot of and I'm not putting Alverne's business out there because he's already said this, but he got COVID in this time as well, and worked through it. And it was
fever pitch, man.
It
was a fever pitch.
It was, man, I mean, it was, and this all happened during the summer of 2020. And when you think about that, if you were Black and educated, or Black and productive in some ways, you were working a lot in the summer of 2020, because everybody and their mother was calling on you to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you were doing that, and you might have been marching, and you might have everybody was working, everybody was doing something, and everybody was surviving as well, right? So there's this particular moment of synergy where this magic happened, right? And this is what you're seeing the results of. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this was almost maybe a year ago. Did we do this? Almost a year ago.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, I feel like I've been at this desk, so like it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but this was almost a year ago when we did this book. Yeah.
Wow, 2 months to do a book. That's how much time do you normally have on a book? Just to put that in comparison for people out there.
I work really fast. And editors love that, because books are always due yesterday. You know what I mean? They're always due yesterday. I draw really fast. So I Am Alfonso Jones, which was my first graphic novel, was 175 pages. I think I drew that in like 13 months. And, but that was in the middle of getting a really awesome gig and moving. John got a really awesome gig and he moved. And we got that book done. But once again, we also have a team of really awesome, talented individuals that worked with us. Just like on this project, we have John and I together, we are Black Kirby, and Damien with us is Tan Lee, right? So shouts out to Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, those nods. But also we have Mother Box Studios, which is a collaborative team of a number of individuals who help work on our project. So that's how, you know, these books get out really, really quickly. That's how Across the Tracks happen. And I used, in reference to the coloring, if I don't point this out, you probably would not notice it, but all the background colors are flat color. The clouds are more fully rendered, and the foreground colors are the only, the foreground figures are the only ones that have highlights. Right? And that was a storytelling approach that allowed us to get the colors done super quickly. And because we had to, I mean, all of it was due in 2 months, not just the story.
You had 2 months, I had less than that.
Right. It was crazy because I could not start it until the script was approved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was, yeah.
They came back and I wrote the outline, it got approved, and then we had to compromise and change some things. And then I think I wrote another outline. I wrote it in like a day or two. And then I literally scripted this book in like 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, I had COVID. So I would literally get up in the morning, I would write for like an hour or two, then I'd be like exhausted, I'd just be sick. And then I'd lay down, and then sometime in the middle of the day or towards the night, I'd feel a little better. I'd get up, script a few more pages. But what I did was something I normally do when I write comics is that I lay it out. But this time I laid out the whole book, like panel by panel, what I thought was going to be on the page. And so that made it easier for me to just go in and write it. But yeah, I think the outline got approved Tuesday, and I turned in the script like Friday. And it was one of those things, they were like, oh, will you have it to us by Monday? And I was like, oh yeah. And then I turned around, I was like, here, it's done. They were like, wait, it's Friday. You got it to Monday. I was like, yeah, I know. But I'm one of those type of people, I love a deadline, but I was like, I think Stacey and John, we knew the importance of what this book meant. And so for us, it was like, we're not going to miss these deadlines. And so for me, I was like, I got to get this done, because I knew Stacey was waiting on the script. And I'm like, like you said, you can't do anything until it gets done. And so I was just like, I got to get this done. And once it's done, I'll lay down and I'll rest, and I'll recover. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was a fever pitch. I wrote this thing in an unbelievable amount of time.
Well, I can tell you, we appreciate you pulling through and making it, man. Like this is a great book. Everyone can get their copy wherever books are sold, Magic City for sure. But before we go, one last kind of elevator pitch. You know, what sets this apart from a lot of the other histories that are going on right now about Greenwood and the massacre?
I think what sets this apart is that it's a historical nonfiction graphic novel that really touches on the people, the places, and the time of that era, and shows you the greatness of what Black history is, but not only Black history, but American history. And is really the quintessential story of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, when you think about the founding fathers and them coming over here and creating the colonies and stuff, this is that story. These are the founding fathers of the 19th century. When you think about that, you know, if you look at any of those people that I mentioned, and you start looking at their background, they go on to do a lot more than what occurs in Greenwood, especially after Greenwood is destroyed. A lot of these families, like the Williams and the Stratfords, and you know, they go on to create some great things and really push forward the idea of equal rights and civil rights, and especially J.B. Stratford. That dude is, yeah. But you know, they go on. So I think this is a great moment in American history, an untold or almost forgotten piece of American history that all Americans need to look at and hear.
Stacey, last words?
Alverne said it better than I could.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for creating a wonderful book. I'm looking forward to your next three about the rebuilding and novels
Right.
left out. So I'll be
Yeah,
happy
we're
to
doing a
moderate
remix
that one as
soon.
well. Well, thank you guys so much. And again, Cross the Tracks, where books are sold. It's a great piece to read.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, totally.